So I want to say hello and welcome to all of you here. And I also want to observe how odd it is for me to be welcoming you, because I'm the newcomer here, the upstart, the new one. Thank you. And I think most of you are probably regulars here, so thank you for coming. So do I need to introduce myself? I think I probably do. I'm Robert Wolterstorff. Just as of last Monday, the new executive director here. I feel honored and grateful to be put in this position, so thank you. Thank you for that. And I want to say thank you for being here. You know, I've been a director in New England for a long time, and I'm used to thanking people for struggling through snowstorms to get to events. But look at this amazing attendance today, and I realize that you gave up the afternoon in the garden or sailing to be here for this important talk, so I'm grateful for that. You know, this shows a lot of interest in today's talk. So, as I said, I'm grateful and excited to be part of this fascinating, lively, and ambitious institution, which is doing such great work in the field of artists and contemporary art in the state of Maine. I want to acknowledge also at this moment, by the way, that this beautiful building, and it's one of the reasons I came here, this beautiful building was built on the ancestral lands of the Wabanaki people. We're all grateful for that. So we have two great guests here today, Arnold Joseph Kemp and Bob Nickas. Welcome to you also. But it's not my job to introduce you. That's going to fall, that responsibility will fall to Donna McNeil. And I think she's probably someone who does not need a lot of introduction in these parts. But I'll say briefly that Donna was with the Maine Arts Commission for 10 years and was the executive director of it from 2009 to 2013. And then since 2017, she's been the director. Indeed, she's the founding executive director of the Alice Beauregard Foundation right here in Rockland, Maine. Now, the Alice Beauregard Foundation has been a great supporter of CMCA. We're really grateful for that. Thank you. And of course, it's because of them that we have this exhibition. We're sitting right here. How remarkable to be sitting amongst the works that Arnold has created. And it's because Arnold Joseph Kemp was the Alice Beauregard 2023. Am I getting the language right? You're going to say the Visual Arts Fellow for 2023. I don't think I need to say any more. I'll probably be up here briefly at the end, but otherwise, Donna, you take it away and kick it off. Thanks. And again, thank you all for being here.
So welcome, Robert. I'll add my welcome to Rockland. It's so great to have you here. I am absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce the Alice Beauregard Foundation 2023 Visual Arts Fellowship Awardee, Arnold Joseph Kemp. Arnold Kemp has received many accolades, among them a Guggenheim Fellowship Award, a Joan Mitchell Foundation Award, Art Matters Award, a Pollock Krasner Award. He is the presidential professor at the Institute of Fine Arts in Chicago. He received his undergraduate work at Tufts University and the Boston Museum School. His master's degree is from Stanford, where he will be proceeding in about a month to be artist in residence. Yeah, very impressive. We are incredibly honored. When I asked Arnold who he would like to be in conversation with, he quickly mentioned Bob Nickas as somebody who really understood his work. Bob Nickas lives and works in New York City. He is an author, a curator, and a critic. He has written numerous catalogs, books, articles, and curated over 120 exhibitions since 1984, including for the Biennale de Lyon and PS1. I am beyond thrilled to welcome these two esteemed and erudite gentlemen to our partner organization with which this would not happen, the Center for Maine Contemporary Art. Thank you all and enjoy the conversation.
I haven't tested this. I guess everyone can hear it. It's good. I wanted to say thank you to Donna and Alice Beauregard Foundation. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you. And thanks to CMCA and the staff of CMCA for working with me in installing this exhibition, which is very important to me, and I won't, and I should thank Bob for joining me in this conversation. I have a little cold, and so I'm going to let Bob lead the way.
I was going to let you lead the way. Arnold and I realized we know each other for about 14 years now. We met in Portland, the other Portland, Oregon, 2010. So I've known him and his work and off and on for a long time, but mostly within the last however many years we worked together. I've seen shows, and there's only 3 works in the show, but I think this is maybe his most important show because in a way, we didn't talk about this, you can disagree. It's a portrait of Arnold in a way that his other shows haven't been. I'm going to kind of go around the room from one work to another, and we'll see how that helps the conversation flow. Behind us is a work titled Stage, and part of it becomes a very low pedestal for the turntable at the back where the records can be played. And Stage, oh wait, Stage isn't the title of this work. Stage, I'm confusing because there's what all of these can be spelled out to say, I would survive, I could survive, I should survive. Okay. And that's very personal for what you've been through in recent years. But it's coming, I think it's coming out of the big disco hit by Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive, from 1978. And what I find really interesting about that song is something I find really interesting about music in general and art in general and artists, which is that had a life which was mostly on the dance floor until it took on this other meaning at the time of AIDS. And art and artists and music can have multiple lives. And, you know, I saw art today. I went to the Farnsworth. I saw the Lynn Drexler. There's all this alive, vibrant painting by someone who's no longer with us. But she's still with us because her work's still in the world. So I Will Survive has this kind of ripple effect. It's a breakup song. It's obviously a breakup song, but it did take on this new amplified meaning. I'm reading from notes. You know, it became a big hit. It was very anthemic, you could say, unfortunately. But then Arnold, in a sense, abstracts it and goes back to something that's important to him, which is language, writing, poetry, and the whole poetics around art to be, in a sense, his anthem.
Which, you know, I think that calling this piece Stage, you know, brings into the gallery and actually brings all of the work sort of an idea about performance and how bodies behave in space, how myself as a body in space has to deal with ideas of survival. And instead of saying, I will survive, I put in this idea of I would, or I could, or I should, because at the moment that I thought of this, which was really just started with me scratching some notes on a piece of paper, I was thinking about possibility. While Gloria Gaynor is quite strong, she's saying, I will survive no matter what. When I wrote this, I felt that and I still feel this way. I think about there's a little bit of unsureness about their survival. And it can be very personal, but it could also just be because in our times, and I'm meaning all of us, we're in a time of uncertainty. Of course, my work is very political, right? But I also am trying to bring in aesthetics and ideas of poetry that suggest things and not just tell you to be worried about who our next president will be or any other thing we could worry about right now. I should thank everyone for coming today also. I mean, I'm seeing some faces of folks that I've met here in Portland before. I really appreciate you coming out. One of my favorite people and a former student of mine is here from Richmond. He was a student of mine in Richmond, Virginia. He now lives in upstate New York, is here. And a really good friend who I met in Italy at a residency last summer is here. And I'm just very moved to be able to share my work and my thoughts about my work with you. I really do make my work for my friends. So when Donna was like, who should we bring? I'm like, we should bring Bob Nickas, because Bob and I write to each other almost every week. And I sometimes write, dear friend Bob, or dear Bob, my friend.
Something else about this piece. You're seeing it in the way it's presented here. There's many variations for this work. As I mentioned, part of it becomes a small part of the stage or platform for the turntable. There are ways that it can be shown where the letters are spelled out, and those phrases within the whole piece are much more legible. It will survive. There was one presentation where part of it was stretched out directly across the floor, and you could look down and walk around it. But that relates, I think, to the importance of writing for you, because there's this idea that, language is a symbolic world, and it can be, there are ways to interpret things. It's almost as if people interpret writing on another higher level than visual art, because we can all see it, it's there, we look at it, we think what we think. But by having all the letters combined and recombined and never in a really fixed position, it's a little bit like in writing how people more experimentally are kind of word makers and word breakers, because the three phases are intermixed, they take different physical forms, so you make language physical and flexible.
And one thing, I don't know if I should say this, but one thing Bob said to me once many years ago, I think, was that painting is like a sentence that can always be revised.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
You sure?
Yeah.
Do you have a recording?
I don't have a recording except up
Uh-oh.
here. It can always be revised, which, helps me think about the performativity of moving these letters around. We could spread this whole phrase out in the gallery, and that could have been the entirety of the show at one point. So this was a very important piece to bring here, and I was really happy. It's really just a digital file that I can send anywhere, and we worked with a local fabricator to cut these letters out of just regular plywood you'd get from like Home Depot, which I also really liked.
The idea of language and I would survive, I could survive, I should survive. I'm maybe not doing it in the right order. I think relates to the big photo piece you'll see to your right, which is possible bibliography. It's a little bit like a show and tell, where Arnold's saying, these are books that I've read that are important to me and that really help form my mind, my brain. And one of the things that you brought up last night was that someone could say, this is you, I said show and tell, but kind of showing off, like, look at, I think what you said.
Self-mythologizing.
Kind of on the same level as all these writers. It's not the case at all. And what's interesting, if you go up and look at one to another, he's finding different ways to hold them, but not just hold them, to touch them. And you have a lot of obviously very, very well-known authors. I just wrote down quickly James Baldwin, Angela Davis, Samuel Delany, Adrian Piper, Zora Neale Hurston, Fritz Fanon, Toni Morrison, but a lot of books about art and music and language. And I think this is really like, if an artist is a house, that's the foundation. And it means more to you than I think someone could tell just by looking at the books. And it's not just about the titles and the authors, but often it's the image on the cover. If it's a mask, like here we have African sleeping sickness, quite a few of the covers really resonate, I think, for you probably as part of a visual language.
Yeah, there's a lot in that work that isn't readable on the surface, so I'm going to try to talk about really what you can see. It's almost like I talk about performance with stage, but there's all sorts of performance around the way my hands are holding certain books, whether these are to present an object or to really hold it in a caring way. There's one image that almost looks like there's movement, like my hand is playing on this book that is about music and dance. There are images with two hands. There are a few images with just one hand. And then when all of the hands start moving, it's almost like a sign language to me. And the whole idea of the grid gives it all an order. Like, you should see I just am trying to put my library together. I have one room in my apartment that is a mess. There's just way too many books. And this whole idea of the grid and giving it order, it's so that I can present it to the public. Like, I'd be embarrassed to have you in my apartment to see the way everything's organized, but in a way only I could understand, with lots and lots of piles of things. But here I think there are rows of things that are not like piles, but there are columns of groupings, like the African sleeping sickness is next to an illustration that includes another mask. You wouldn't know that, but I drew this one here, this one. That's my illustration. Other books that you can't really see this, but books that were given to me by teachers or really dear friends, old friends. There's a lot of sentimentality, I think, in this, but also there's some desire to put order to the sentimentality and not just, have to live with this thing, but I think an attempt to try to understand all of this knowledge that I've gathered through these books, and to understand all the feelings that I have in relationship to these books as well. I jokingly said when I moved one column into the very back wall that is the gay lesbian section of the bookstore, because it's Baldwin, Angela Davis, and Samuel Delany. And it's not that they're the only gay lesbians here, but I guess I gave them their own special section as being sort of advanced forerunners of a certain kind of politics that has shaped me and many others.
There's a feature every Sunday in the New York Times Book Review. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with this feature, mainly because the last question very often, most of the time, is, You're organizing a literary dinner party. Which 3 writers, living or dead, would you invite? And I just realized that's your dinner party.
We used
Which
to
I
ask,
think you just have to sit in a corner and listen.
we
You
used
couldn't.
to ask a question like that when we were interviewing graduate students to enter the MFA in painting and printmaking at VCU, and I'm sure my friend Eric got asked which painters would you have a dinner party with?
The title of the show is To Whom Keeps a Record? And my immediate reaction to that was that kind of letter. I don't know that people really write it anymore, where you address it to whom it may concern. And it's because you don't know who's on the receiving end. Who is that going to be? And to me, that's really a metaphor for art. It's almost like, that artist's letter, you put it out in the world. Maybe it's going to go to the dead letter office. Maybe you don't know who's going to go out there. And it also turns on what I was saying before, that art stays in the world, can stay in the world so much longer than the artist. But this idea of the unknown recipient, that's anybody who's going to come to the work and give it a moment and think about it and maybe get something from it. And you'll never know. And that's fine, because it's real. You have people who ask, they might ask a writer, who's your audience? Well, imagine you ask that to Stephen King. He says millions of books. He has no idea whose audience is. His audience is probably, he can count on one hand because he's probably writing for himself. Our writer's always writing for their editor. And then maybe there's 1 or 2 people, because every writer, if they're lucky, they have someone close to them they can get the feedback from. They can get a response that they can count on. But what about art? And what about you're not knowing how that goes out in the world and to whom? I don't think you're bothered by it.
I love this idea of to whom it may concern. I mean, people don't really write letters, so people barely read anymore. But I love this as just to whom it may concern. It sounds like something my mother would write, and I appreciate that. Language was very important in my family. I've never talked about this with you, Bob, but my mother came to the United States to go to school. She was from Panama. She grew up speaking Spanish and, came here in the early 50s, I suppose, to go to school in Illinois. And then my father, who's from the Bahamas, he came here also to go to school. They had love at first sight in Chicago, moved to Boston, started their family, but there was always this thing about our Spanish-speaking family and speaking a language that my father couldn't really understand and didn't want his children to really speak. So when I would speak myself, my father would say to me, "Stop singing, you're English." And my mother would say to me, when I'd speak, "Stop speaking in a monotone." Because my father would insist on, because he's colonized, British colonial education, he would insist that we speak the Queen's English in the house. He called it the Queen's English. And my mother, whose English was perfect, in fact, she spoke many languages, was also fluent in Spanish. So
It's more musical.
I feel like my parents, there was a little, through me, were having a little bit of a cultural war. And I like this, this to whom it may concern. Then it's like, it's an invitation, right, to come into a cultural conversation. And to whom it may concern, they might not pick it up. They might say, "This doesn't concern me," but like you said, I'm not so bothered by it. I've tried to give multiple ways of people entering this exhibition, whether it's visually or interacting with the vinyl records back there, and interacting orally, or just being in the space when all of the chairs aren't here. This gallery is really responding to the architecture of the space, and I think it gives a real feeling of not. There's a kind of quietude, but it's also saying, "Look at me." It's like I always think about like a Walt Whitman poem. Whitman is always very loud, like standing up and saying, "Hear what I'm saying," versus an Emily Dickinson who's saying, excuse me, I have something to say. And I feel like this exhibition, this installation, is more along those lines, which is a part of me where I feel like I'm a little bit more like, excuse me, I have something to say, versus listen to me right now. You know, probably people who've studied with me have seen me do both. I don't know. I digress. I'm so sorry, but the whole idea of the records and asking audiences to pick up a selection of records from my collection and to interact with them is also suggested by how the hands are interacting with the books. Like, it was how could we take this idea of actually coming into physical contact with a kind of knowledge and bring it right to audiences? Because I think that, I really believe that there are many ways of studying and learning, and it could be in a classroom, very academic, or it could really be out in the world, out in the street, and really having physical contact with culture or knowledge in whatever form it is.
The piece with all the books opens up to a bigger issue, especially today. We're speaking about it this morning, which is, we used to, past tense, we used to live in a world of knowledge. And now, through whatever you want to call it, accelerated capital and so on, we live in a time of information. And it's a huge problem with a lot of disaster looming before us. If you think about the Don Moffat show, and he has stickers that say science, and we live in a world where a lot of people don't believe scientists. And this idea that we no longer live in a world of knowledge, art is part of the world of knowledge. Information goes hand in hand, especially today, with misinformation. I don't think there's something called misknowledge. Something's wrong, or it's a lie, right? But this idea that we can reach out and take something off the shelf and we can hold it in our hands is intimate, and it might take us somewhere, and it might answer some questions. The records, when you bring up that parallel to holding the record, I'm a big record collector, and I think from childhood, because obviously I was really interested in books and writing, but music, I couldn't believe that this thing I was holding had this information within it. People's voices came out of it, and music came out of it, and it's all compressed into this object, which today, a lot of people don't have records. They just have music in their computers. But so it's this almost a kind of fetish object, and I don't know if you think about that in relation to the books, the information, the compression, and how it actually really is at our fingertips. Most people just think their smartphones are at their fingertips, but so is this whole other world of information.
what I'm thinking about in terms of the books, the hands, even this piece, is evidence. Like, you had mentioned this idea about artists in the world.
We're going to get to that.
Okay. But all of this is evidence of my, there's some sort of organization, but it is a little, not crazy, I don't want to use that word, but there's a lot of imaginative leaps, I think. But just this idea of evidence of the knowledge, there's the evidence of the books, there's those actual records that I'm saying they come from my collection, and that is evidence of what I've been saying to you. You don't actually have to believe me, I don't think, but that's evidence. And I talk about this piece coming from just me writing that phrase on a piece of paper. I actually presented that in an exhibition at some point, just the piece of paper with the phrase on it. And I felt very lucky to get the grant from Ellis Beauregard, which helped me take this evidence of me writing that on the paper and making it a bigger object that really takes up space and has a presence in space, so that the evidence of me as a maker, as a thinker, as a writer, or just as a person in the world, it's bigger. And in fact, when I first designed these, I think I designed them to be 6 feet tall. And the night before they got cut, I was up in bed all night thinking, that is the absolute wrong size. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I need to call the fabricator and say, they need to be 7 feet. Because I want this phrase, which could be a kind of a quieter, excuse me, I have something to say, to be a louder, to have a bigger presence, not louder, just something you can't ignore in the room. This idea of a kind of uncertainty or a doubt about survival.
The title of the piece with the turntable and the records is Music Brings Goodness to All. And I told you that immediately made me think of the Albert Eiler record from 1969, Music is the Healing Force of the Universe. Is there some aspect for you that, as I think it's true for quite a few artists I know, that it is this kind of, it's their way to healing certain aspects of their life, the making of art. And it's interesting too, when you mention writing the phrase down on paper, there's this idea as well that you can write something down, your own hand, on paper, as a way of giving it a greater chance of actually coming to pass, right? I mean, the simple fact, people who write lists get more done. We know that. But there's something about writing it down because it's a way of speaking to yourself and telling yourself, this is what I need or this is what I want. Is there a healing aspect to your being an artist? I've never asked anyone that question. It's your fault.
It's not an easy answer when I think about it.
Like Sun Ra has that record, Cosmic Tones for Mental Therapy. I know, you're not one of them, but I know a number of artists that they're really working through things in their art, various obsessions and troubles.
I'm looking at the work because I'm looking for the answer to your question in the work, which is really important to me. I would say yes. You know, you've all witnessed that when I talk about my work, I tell a lot of stories. And I think that that sort of storytelling is a way of me shaping the past, or not, maybe healing the past, digesting it, bringing it into my body, into my brain, and being able to put it out again. I think that is a kind of direction of healing. And I think more than ever, as I've gotten older and I'm not indestructible, that I feel I start to get anxious when I'm not in my studio, when I'm not making something, when I've even started, sometimes I'm not making really big things or taking a lot of photographs. But lately I've been sitting outside and doing plein air painting. So maybe
Really?
one day you'll see my watercolors, Bob. And I am it's not a lot of painting. Looks like there's not a lot of painting here, but I do think of myself as a painter and a sculptor.
Well, there are just no paintings in this particular
Yeah.
show.
But yes, I've been making plein air paintings.
I mentioned to you also, it's going to be another question I never ask people or have the nerve to ask, but I saw a documentary about film portrait of Mary Heilman. My friend Matt Creed made that film. And at one point, obviously she's much more reflective as she gets older. She's really been through her life. And she speaks about more or less how she decided to become an artist. I mean, this is someone as a little girl, she thought she was going to be a cloistered nun, but she ended up being an artist. And she said the reason is, why did I become an artist? To be someone. And then she amplified it by saying to be someone in the world, as if there's a difference. Well, I guess there is a difference if you're an artist, because to be someone in the world means there's something of you that's in the world that people, when they see it, they see. Like today I saw a Lynn Drexler painting. I thought of Lynn Drexler. But we have that in you go through a museum, I mean, not a contemporary art museum, but you go through the Met, all of these artists, they got there one way or another. They're there. The question I never ask anyone is, why did you become an artist? You're probably the first artist in your family.
I am the first artist
Why
in
did you
my
become an artist?
family.
You could have become all sorts of things. You could have become a writer, a playwright, who knows?
Well, I don't think I became an artist. I think I always was simply an artist. I think I'm one of the people, maybe it doesn't look like that, but I think I'm one of the people who was just born artist. Of course, I went to school. I made decisions to, I wanted to go to art school. My parents said no, so I got an English literature degree at the same time that I was getting a Bachelor in Fine Arts degree. I have just made many decisions in my life that have kept me in the arts and making art. I remember my very first drawing, which was done with a Sharpie under a chair in my mother's room. And it's like a little kid's drawing, and it looks like some bubble heads with wiggly arms and these balls with lines. And of course, I don't think anyone would know what that was. I think I was 3 or 4. My memories go way, way back. I can remember memories from before I could speak. But back to that little drawing under my mother's chair, it is a portrait of Robin and Batgirl. I, you know, I didn't, as a kid, sit down and write a poem or write a novel. I made a drawing with the means that I had. And I did other things. I would take bricks out of the sort of the brick patio behind our house, and I would put earthworms together under the bricks so the earthworms could have babies. And I was trying to, like, I thought I was going to be a scientist. I loved to take things apart. You couldn't leave me alone with a television or watch or a radio, because I would start to take it apart. Very rarely could I get it back together. And I think that is, destruction is a means of making an artistic gesture as well. But I think I've never said it before. I don't think I have the confidence to say it. So thank you for asking the question, because I feel I was born an artist. I wanted to do some other things, but that's it. Should we open up to
Well,
questions?
are we far enough along to let people jump in?
You're about 40 minutes in. Yeah.
Excellent. Any questions? It's not working anymore.
It's a weird thing. I don't understand it. Oh.
No, but you don't have to. No, you don't have to take it off. Thank you, Arnold. I was told you don't have to take it off. Are there any questions?
You said you weren't sure if that worked for anyone else, but I wanted to say kind of the same thing, but flip it around to a question, because I love it the way it is, and I love the fact that it's kind of obscure. And much of your work is about voice and expression, but this is layered. It's a word you used, layered, and obscurity, and the lack of transparency. But you told us that there are many ways you do it. You could have spread it all the way around the walls, around the floor. Do you like it this way? Why did you do it this way?
Of course, I like it this way. I think, like, as an artist, I put things in the world that I really believe in, and I try to install them the way that I believe they work best, and that it's not all given to you immediately, but that it causes someone to read and reread or misread is really important to me. The idea of the layers is also an idea of, when you figure it out, repetition. And that is something that you see that I use in my work a lot. And repetition is a kind of insistence that something should be, or something should exist, or something should happen. And you mentioned Mary Heilman. One of my favorite things about Mary Heilman is there's a little Art 21 video of her painting in her studio, and she paints a couple of white lines on a black background, and she stands back from it, or she sits back from it, and she looks at it, and then she looks at the camera and she says, "I like that. I'm going to make 10 of them." I have no problem with that, because she's insisting on her vision. She's magnifying her vision that she's wanting to put in the world. And I've learned a lot from Mary Heilman and many other artists about the power of insistence.
Those are road paintings. So, if the painting is this big and the road kind of goes from here to there, of course, she makes another painting because she's going a little further. But I think.
Emily?
First of all, I just think formally the work is really beautiful. These images are striking. But the thing that I'm interested in, you talk about it being sort of performative, and really I think it is performative, but it's performative in a generous way, right? You're internalizing, and through the way that you've organized it, it becomes like a lineage. Like you're pointing out, like who was really important to your thinking, and how who you are this in a way. But I'm curious if there's anything in the entire lesson. Is there like an aspirational element, or is there a seed that you hope it gets planted, through people encountering this?
The seed is actually in the title of possible bibliography, that it's a possibility that anyone can stand in this gallery and imagine what are the books that they would add to this bibliography. So there, I think that is, thanks for that question, because the whole idea of the possibility of the bibliography is that it suggests, I think, a kind of an incompleteness, or that it could be added to. And I think that I would like to see what people would add. That would be really important to me.
Something else that occurred to me, hadn't before, is you have long history teaching, the idea of being an educator and starting more or less every semester, I imagine, with a reading list for your students. And this is a kind of visual reading list for people who come to the gallery or the museum.
I got this great text a week or two ago from a former student from several years ago that said that my graduate seminar I was teaching to painters at VCU was very important to him, and that one of the books that we were reading was Kaja Silverman's, that's a book, what's the book? Incredible book. Flesh of My Flesh, Kaja Silverman. And my student from many years ago, he's rereading it with another student, and they're going to have a phone conversation and talk about the ideas in that book. And he said that seminar was a bright light, and that I was a bright light. Me was a bright light. And obviously I am just on cloud nine. That made my day. Like, so we met in 2010. He was my student in 2013 or 14.
You see, it's true. When you're teaching, I don't teach anymore because it's just too much trouble. You can be saying whatever you're saying to them, thinking, oh, this is great, and this is going to really be good for you, right? And they're sitting there, and maybe they have their laptops, and they're just doing email or doodling or whatever they're doing. And someone who had a much longer history teaching than me said, no, you don't realize. You say something today, 10 years later, they're going to go, oh, right. It's beyond like a time-released pill. Like it can have an effect later. And the fact that it has an effect at all means there was some success for the effort they made or didn't in the moment.
I also had that experience. There were things that I didn't read or I read and didn't get. But my experience with especially grad students, and one of my former students is here, I give much more than I know they can do. And I give advice like, I know you're not going to be able to read all this. Just gut the text, I say. Just gut the text. And they say, what do you mean, gut the text? And I will say, read the introduction in the first chapter, and then read the last chapter of the book. Gut the text. But I'm going to give you much more. I'll give you the bibliography so that you can do your own research and discover more when you have time. True or false? This is Eric Deal is an amazing painter. I want everyone to know. One of my favorite artists. Eric, you had your hand up? I feel like a teacher.
Thank you, Arnold, for being here. Bob, thank you for being here too. And thank you for sharing your work of being a person in the world and doing this. Like it's so important. But I had a question to the hands in your work. Artist hands are so particular in how they read. They're different than the hands of a surgeon or an academic or something else. But I find that I track my own age with my looking at my hands. I see my hands now and I say these are the hands of my father. They're not my hands that I had when I was a kid. Looking at your hands, I wanted to ask like the origin of that for you in particular, because I know being familiar with other work of yours where you have hands coming out of these masks, through your own hands, where that came into your work, and like if you remember the moment that came into your work.
Well, the hands, I do have other bodies of work where my hands are inside sort of latex masks and they're really big photographs, and the idea of performance and maybe puppets comes to mind. But really the first time I did a piece photographing my hands was with this project. And it's the last work that I made before I moved to Chicago 8 years ago. I made this at VCU. And, I don't know if this is your question, but your question makes me think about inspiration in some way, like what led me to do this, what was the inspiration maybe, what was I thinking of, what was I experiencing that led me there. I mean, all of those things come together when I make a decision to make a work, and then I think about the materials I want to work with, and I just make certain decisions to make it legible. I can't, I'm trying to answer your question as best I can, but it's a self-portrait, right? But always somehow a turn on that. I'm always thinking, as an artist, what can I add to the conversation that's out there among other artists and other painters and other people who deal with images? What can I do that is in conversation with others but different? So even the idea of self-portraiture just being in the hands, I think is enough of a difference in the idea of self-portraiture to keep me going.
I think I have one more, or maybe one last, or two last questions, but the woman raised her hand first.
I had actually a similar question that maybe ends up being a follow-up, because I was really struck by your hands in that work also, and I was thinking about it. I think I was talking to someone at the opening, and I was saying, well, you could have made the choice to have your hands in the same position in every photograph, and clearly you didn't. And I think a lot about storytelling, and for me, the hands very much remind me of American Sign Language. And so I thought, well, if the book covers weren't in the photo, what would your hands be saying? Because they're positioned differently every time. And in a way, to me, there is a message. There's some kind of like secret message in the positioning of your hands. Did you think about that at all? What are you trying to say? Maybe.
I have thought of exactly about that, actually. this is going to sound like it's not the real answer, but it is. Honestly, I feel like a lot of the messages in my work, it's about love, honestly. And all kinds of love. And I do what I do out of love. I love being an artist. I love making art. I love teaching. I love my students. I love my friend Bob.
We have time for one more. You had your hand up.
Thanks for asking that. That's very important. And there was one more question.
I believe. You had your hand up.
What historical period do you think of?
You know, I think a lot of these books I collected in the 90s. Early, I'd say between 89 and 91, many of these books came into my possession, but within different books, different histories are referred to. From the James Baldwin to...
And it comes into the present.
Yes, that
Hilton
comes
Halls
right
is right
into the
there.
present. There's But it's interesting because I do think there's a way of, through this project, of telling a history, and different from a history that you might see in a Kerry James Marshall painting or a Kara Walker exhibition. Like, history is, the way I think about it, it's whoever tells that story affects the history. Like, we all have maybe a shared history, but when we go deeper, like how that history is told, really, it depends on who is telling it. And this was a way of me dealing with my history, and that I made this project in Richmond, Virginia, when I was living in the capital of the Confederacy, and my studio was across the street from a cemetery that had 18,000 Confederate soldiers buried in it, 2 US presidents, and the Confederate president were buried right across from my home in my studio where I made this project.
And it wasn't an easy time for you there.
It was a very difficult time. I appreciate your question so much because there's the love and then there's the history.
For example, see if I can put it in historical context. It was Zora Gilbert's. You know what I'm saying? Does that happen to me?
There's a lot of, I mean, it might not be on the very surface of the work, but everything in there has real meaning to me. And, you know, Zora Neale Hurston is someone I studied in depth and have written about, and that period of the Harlem Renaissance is really important. There's another book in there called, it's by Jessie Redmond Fawcett. It's called Plum Bun. And Jessie Redmond Fawcett is another artist from the Harlem Renaissance that isn't as well known as Zora Neale Hurston, but at the time was right up there with everyone else. So I'm also, in some ways, I'm trying to bring to light some important people or important authors that people might not know. And I think that's the purpose of a bibliography. Yeah.
I started high school with Eaton.
Yes. Where Zora Neale Hurston, yeah.
Maybe one final comment is, I've thought more about this piece, which I love. I've shown some of these works, but hearing you speak about it today and people's response to it, I realize, and it's not only true of this one piece, but there's always this recognition, there's often a recognition, not always, that we're never really one person. And it's because there's so many things that have informed us, and there's so many ways that what informs us from other people goes out, and is part of a collective knowledge in a collective world. And that to me is this kind of way that the whole bibliography can be seen in those larger terms of what is an artwork.
Mm-hmm. And the possibility of people adding to it, I think, is a way of me reaching out for community as an individual, actually saying, not can we come together in some sort of hippie way, but more like, let's think together, let's study together, which I think is really important. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Arnold. Thank you.